Dreaming away. Da-dee-dee-dee. Alrighty then. We are up and running. Hi everyone. Welcome to another Did You Know That? So, I'm trying to even think about my timetable here. I think it's been a while since I've gone. I think it's been 3 weeks, somewhere around there. I don't remember now. It's blurring in for me right now. So, we are looking at particular items today. I'm gonna do a Star Wars themed idea and piece, and that's in the inspiration of the Magic Wheelchair contest that we have going on, which ends the 31st. So if you have not joined yet and tried making a piece here for these kiddos, I'd strongly recommend taking a look at this. This is pretty awesome. It's a great cause. So we are, for those that don't know, doing a contest on ZBrush Social right now. It's opening to you and our community. It's a fantastic little contest that we've put together with the Magic Wheelchair Company. So in essence, quick synopsis here. The Magic Wheelchair is a nonprofit organization that creates costumes for kiddos that are in wheelchairs. So we did a podcast with them. So the podcast is right here. And we got inspired with them because ZBrush is already being used in several of their projects, but we got inspired with them to, hey, let's open it up to our community and see what they can create and what they would make. So what's happening here is Magic Wheelchairs put together a whole bunch of builds. So there are going to be at least 7 builds that is going to be unveiled at this year's Comic-Con. So you, one of you community members, your design is going to be picked to be turned in to an actual costume for a kiddo, which is pretty awesome. And then it's going to be unveiled at the Comic-Con. So that's pretty cool. And so this is just the rules that we have here. So again, you could just click on this contest in progress. So the theme is Star Wars because they're also working with other companies as well. So you have a contest forum here that you can go to. So this is where all the contestants are participating that are doing something right now and sharing their pieces. So in the inspiration of this and thinking of Star Wars, I wanted to do a Star Wars themed piece and take the time here to go through all this. So the text mortar, if we want, we'll turn on. I'll just turn on the magnifier, right? So that should help you a lot. When I go in, if I go into any part of the UI, okay, I'll just turn on that, and that way you're seeing everything there at a grander scale. So, maybe I'll look at too also next stream making my text a little bit bigger. I just like having a lot of workspace for myself. I'm being an artist now. Okay, so I'll turn this on so you can see this. And to do that, it's actually just Shift M. Okay, so Shift M does this, okay? Which there's also preferences for it in here. So in the preference menu, okay, you'll have a magnify glass here, and you can make the radius larger. You can have more of a zoom, less of a zoom, right? You can have no fade, right? Fade, so I can turn off the fade. How much curvature you want. Now we're getting fish-eyed. Whoa, right? And then do you want a shadow? Do you want a frame, right? So you can completely do your own magnifier in a sense, right? What's going on, Peter? So this has been really helpful for places that, as I travel and work and do presentations, this has been a very useful little feature. So I'll just use that so you can definitely see everything. So again, that's just Shift M is the shortcut. So it's the same thing as going here to the preferences and clicking this magnifying glass button here. But I don't ever do that. I always hit that old Shift M. Okay? So you can see what my inspiration here was the mouse droid. So I have a mouse droid here, and I want to just take the time in this stream to kind of break down some items of how I created, specifically, the main piece of the mouse droid. These items in here, I think, were really easy to do actually for me. It didn't take me that much time to do these pieces in here at all. Okay, so I want to take the time to kind of cover some of the features I use to make this guy. Um, Before I do that, though, okay, so I'm going to click to another one here. Before we get into this, there is a book that you all should definitely purchase, especially if you're a hard surface person. This book right here, and seeing that we're doing Star Wars theme now, is one of the best purchases I've ever made. And you can see it's oversized, so you can see it covers my big head. Right? It's an oversized book. It's got all the original drawings and blueprints of the original Star Wars movies, and then there's some great stories about the movie shooting. So for example, this page, you can see here, it actually opens up and it gets this big, right? So you got a lot of stuff like this where you have some amazing drawings from the original work, and you can see the original Millennium Falcon, which wasn't this actually, and I only know that because they talk about it in this book. So it's pretty cool, and I love just reading up about film and seeing things, what you can do. So, but it breaks down. In fact, here I just switched to the page of the Millennium Falcon. This was the original Millennium Falcon. Actually, it was just called the pirate ship. So it's cool to read about this and see these original drawings done for the original 3. So it's just the original 3. It's called Star Wars: The Blueprints. There's a gold version, which the covers just go to gold as far as I know. I don't know if it's worth the money. It's an oversized book. It's awesome. I recommend it every time I talk and I teach, especially when I go hard surface. I pull this book out a lot. It's one of my favorite books. Jump on it if it's like under $100. Get it, because the thing fluctuates like crazy. Sometimes I'll go and the book's $500. Sometimes I'll go and the book's $200. So if you see the book on this book under $100, grab it, because then that's a very good deal. Like that's when I got it. I got it when it was under $100. Okay. So I guess you guys missed the Millennium Falcon part. I would say jump on Amazon or wherever you want. Okay. So you'll really like it. So I'm just looking at a question that's coming through. If you set a custom hotkey, can you override the standard or the UI prevent losing original shortcuts? Well, when you override a shortcut, right? So as for an example, like this perspective, it's the P, right? Is what's doing this, right? Just clicking the P turns it on and off in perspective. So if you're going to override this by holding down Control and Alt and tapping on it, now along the top, so if you want to look up here in the UI, so you want to look up in this area, okay? So you can see it's going to say something here when I hold down Control and Alt and I tap on this, right? So now it's saying assign any hotkey. So let's just say the number 4. So now it's the number 4. Well, that P's gone. You can't have both. Like the button and the slider, percentage, most of them can only have one hotkey. Okay, there are a couple exceptions to the rule, which one of them is this menu, which is the space bar. It's also tapping the right click. But you can turn off the tap the right click. But then you can also go make your own hotkey as well for that menu if you wanted to as well, because that menu does exist in the preferences. Okay, so once you have those, all right, in your preferences, okay, there's going to be a hotkeys menu here. So now I can store it on my computer here, so that'll change my perspective, shortcut to the number 4, which I don't want, and then I can restore back, okay, and then you can save and load here. So I can restore this, and then now I can come back here and you can see the P is back. So you have a way to restore, but you can't have both, if that's what you're asking. You can't have, like for example, in this example, can't have P and the number 4 be both the shortcuts. Does that make sense? Where was that question? Steven? Steven7? Or Steven? Does that make sense? Is that was answering the question? I want to make sure I was answering that question, what you were really asking. So, and then of course this is where you go and you can save out and load. So you can go to multiple computers, multiple stations, and be able to manipulate that and change that. Okay? So glad I answered that question. So, um, I want to talk about building this part, right? Because you can see it's nothing fancy. It's just a cube and ZModeler. But there is some specific things that, again, I want to talk about with ZModeler that I think are very important, okay? Um, and it's going to help kind of the foundation of where I'm going with this and how I started creating this. But before we do that, all right, let's take a look at in the texture menu. So I've got this guy that I pulled off the internet that's just a reference image just to have it there. I like to have it sitting here in my document. It's kind of gives me like the images right here. I still use a secondary monitor for references, but there's a lot of times I will put reference images right inside of ZBrush here. So I'm just using Spotlight to do this, right? So all I did was imported this image, okay? And then I just selected it, and I can just click on this little add the Spotlight button here, right? And then it'll add it to Spotlight like this, right? And so Lightbox will open. I can close Lightbox with the comma key, right? And then now in here I can use all these dials and I could just scale this down, right? Because I'm just looking to have this just as a simple little inspirational reference. Okay, that's it. I'm not doing anything crazy here. And then the Z key for ZBrush is the shortcut to come out of edit image mode, which is edit spotlight mode, into projection spotlight mode. So in essence, there's two modes to spotlight. There's this mode when you see this dial, it's all about editing any of the images. It's not even paying attention now to the model, right? It's just only paying attention to this image. Now hit the Z key, you'll see the dial disappears, but the image stays. So now I'm using this more as a reference, and I got to make sure in the brush palette, in samples here, okay, that I turn off this spotlight projection. By default, it's going to be on. So I'm going to turn that off because I just want to use this as a reference. If I do not turn that spotlight projection off, then Spotlight's being used for what it was really built for, which was having an image hovering over a model, and then you can use it to paint and sculpt and so forth. Okay? So the Z for the spotlight radius can be changed if you want to. You have that capability as well. You can create your own shortcut if you wanted to. Okay? So in transform, you have edit spotlight right there. So there's your button to be able to change that. Is the surface, if the surface is tiled at an angle or curve, do you place those small parts? Rakesh, are you talking about the image, or are you talking about this little mouse droid thing right now that I'm going to start building again in front of you? Yes, it's only been going, we just started the stream, so you didn't miss much here. Okay, so again, here's your edit spotlight, so you can create your own shortcut from that. And if you're talking about this part of the mouse droid, I'm actually going to get into and showing you how I did that myself. Okay. You don't see this icon, this icon in here. Definitely should be in your ZBrush. It ships with it. It's been there since version 4, which was 7 years ago. So that's where it's always been in the edit spotlight. And then all other spotlight controls are here for anti-aliasing, transparency, turning spotlight on and off, and then adding images to spotlight if you want to. Okay, so let's look at this, all right? And let's just clone this for now, all right? And let's just start only with this thing. And let's kind of just talk really quickly about creating this and the simplification of this and why I wanted to keep it simple and keep it very small like this. Because looking at our image, we got some rounding, you know, especially here, it rounds a little bit more than say here or here. So I want to start playing with this manipulation. Okay, so I want to start with just a simple cube. So let's do this. Let's turn on our handy dandy gizmo 3D, not gizmo. Just don't feed it after midnight, okay? And don't let any water get on it. It's not going to be pretty, okay? So I'm going to hit this home button right here, and that's just going to center my model back at the center of the world, which it already was. So in essence, what I'm doing here, I'll turn the floor on so you all can see it better. So if I do this, right, I move it off the home, right, where this gizmo is, when I click this, you can see it recenters. I'm also going to turn perspective mode off because when I'm doing hard surface, I always turn perspective mode off. Okay, so that way I can really look orthographic view, right? So this is orthographic view, but there's still a camera on, right, looking at it. So there's a little bit of a distortion there. So I want to turn that off, okay? So again, I'm just, no matter what I do, I can hit the home and beep, puts it back to the home. All right, sound effects are crucial. Beep, you got to have them. So the thing I want to point out about this, everybody, it's all about the gizmo. Okay, so if I do this again where the gizmo is like this, okay, and I hit home, see how the model's not sitting at the center, right? Because we're centering the gizmo is what we're doing. We're not centering the mesh. It's the gizmo's being centered, and then wherever the gizmo is relative to the mesh, that's how this is moving around. So this is why maybe I would hit this first, this little MapQuest icon right there, the old school MapQuest for those that are old like me and can remember that software. All right, you hit that, and then now you hit the home, and you can see it can move to the center. Now, another way that I want to highlight in here is in geometry, okay, there's position sliders. And you can see there's sliders right here. So you can see in the X, it hasn't been moved. But in Y and Z it has, so I can also just come here and zero these out if I wanted to move this particular piece back to the center. And that leaves the gizmo where it's at. Because maybe that's what I want. Maybe I want to move the mesh, right, but not move the gizmo. So this is a way to do that as well. Okay? So I'm going to go back to centering this, all right? And the reason why I'm going to switch to gizmo is I'm going to hit the gears, and I'm going to use our deforming menu here where we have our deformers. Oh, wow, we're having a battle right now. Team Gizmo versus Team Transpose, right? Wow, that actually, I like that question. That could be an interesting poll. We should do a poll because, I got the right-click army versus the original navigation army. And then there's the third navigation, which probably like 1% of the world uses, if that. Okay? So depending on, I use both, depending on what I'm doing. But I would say I'm probably 80-20 in the favor of Gizmo. And it's just because I love Gremlins. Now, I do have an original Gremlin sitting behind me over here. So what I want to do is use this capability. So because I have the gizmo on, and this is why I like the gizmo, okay, I can click this polycube, right? And what it's done is it's replaced that mesh. Okay, so it's gone. I've literally replaced it. Okay, if I didn't want to do that, I'd want to mask out first this and then click the polycube, and you can see the cube's now sitting there, right? And again, this is based upon gizmo, right? So if I'm clicking on this, I do that, you can see the cube sitting now above. So where that gizmo sits is important. This is one of the things I want to reiterate, okay, for this, because once you wrap your head around this, there's actually things you're going to be able to do. Okay, so I'm just going to, in essence, reconstruct this and build it from scratch, okay? So I'm going to click my gear, all right, and then I'm going to hit the polycube, and then bingo bango, right? You can see that the gear is orange right now. So that's because if I hit the W key, I can actually switch back and forth between editing the cube to actually turning gizmo. So that's the same thing. If I click on the gear, you can see there's polycube and gizmo 3D, right? So it's doing the same thing, right? So here I'll go this a little bit smaller, right? And then I can click here and polycube, and now I have the cones, right? So if I hit the W key, I can swap between those two modes. And this is because once you start getting into deformers, there's going to be times where I want to come out of deformer, use the gizmo, and then go right back into that deformer. So that's what this is doing. So I'm going to grab this cone, change these spans. So this is my Y. So I'm going to put that to 1, this to 1, and then this to 1. So what it's doing is I'm giving myself a cube with 6 faces. Super simple, super easy, nothing crazy. Now, I've got that Star Wars book again, right? This oversized book, right? This oversized Star Wars book, and it's got all the drawing. So, of course, there was a drawing of the mouse droid in here. So I took a photo and I brought that in ZBrush. So let me show a nice way to maybe use that original drawing. Why not? Use the original drawing, right? So in the texture palette, here's my photo that I took, okay? So this is an image right from the book. And so what I want to do is I want to use this image as kind of a referencing. So there are many ways of referencing. Right now I'm using Spotlight, right, as one way to reference. So for this particular model, maybe I'll use the floor grid instead, okay? So I'm going to dock the draw palette because you guys can't see it because my little banner to remind you that the Magic Wheelchair Contest has only got 2 weeks left. So if you're not participating, why not? Get in there. Get in there. Get out there. Okay? So I have now the draw palette. And at the bottom of the draw palette here, okay, we'll turn on our magnifier. You've got front, up, down, left, right, so forth. You got snapping features, right? So I can snap to the mesh. And you can see the floor grid actually fits the mesh, right? So you can snap to axes. You can snap to all, which snap to all is if I had multiple subtools, right? Because right now this is snapping to the selected subtool, which happens to be my cube right now, okay? So you have this capability, right, to mess with this. So this is just changing the floor grid size. So I'll put this back at 3 so it's big again, right? So this is what the snappings are giving me the capability to do. It's actually resizing the grid for us to fit depending upon the model that we're working on, okay? So what I want to do is I want to use this left, right, and front, back, okay? Because looking at my image that we have in the texture palette, again, I'm clicking on the texture palette in here, right? There is, right, a slight drawing of the front and the side, okay? So I'm going to come over here and let's open up front, back, and you'll see there's a map 1, map 2, and there's a bunch of other settings here. I'm going to click my map 1 here. And then I'm going to throw that in, and then there you go. Perfect! It's what I've always wanted, a floating image. Right? So you can see we have this image here. All right? Now, we've got some problems in the fact that the image is not in the right orientation where I really want it. Okay? And I don't need this whole image either, even though it's cool. So let's use some of these controls. So I've got a rotate capability, right? So right there, that solves that problem. So I can rotate in 90-degree increments, or I can even use this angle slider, and you can see I can freely give rotational that I want, okay? So that's the first thing I'm all right. Number 2, if you guys are noticing, I can see through the cube at the image, okay? And what's controlling that is this fill mode. Okay, so if I drop this to fill mode 2, you can see I don't see through the cube anymore, and 1, and then 0. So obviously 0 turns it off. 1 makes the image at like 25% opacity. 2 makes it at like 50% opacity, but you can't look through the model. When you go to 3, now what you're doing is making the model transparent and also playing with the image's opacity. And what's going to come alive now are 2 sliders. So I, as an artist, can play with the image and the model. So this is for my image opacity right here, okay? And then this is for the model's opacity, which right now we just got a cube. So it's tough to really see what that's doing. Once we get going here, you guys will see it. So you can see by me playing with this, I can kind of get an outline now of a cube. So let's also crop this. Let's play with this image here, all right? So we can even do an inverse. Oh, that's cool. Now it looks like we're working on an X-ray version. In fact, it's a little bit easier to even see the lines in this case, right? So if I go back to the inverse, the way that drawing was and the image I took, it wasn't that great, right? But the inverse actually is working better for me to see it better, okay? So I'm going to switch it back to the original. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say adjust. And what that does is adjust this image, right? And now I have this image at its full size. So I can just click and move this around. Now, when I get to the corners, you'll see these little red circles there, okay? So I'm at the front, right, is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at the side, okay? So I'm going to say, you know what, let's edit this. Let's crop this maybe to here. Maybe let's do this portion, and then I'll come down here to the bottom, and let's bring that up, and let's crop that. We don't need all of this. I'm just really worried about, all I care about is that front image of him. And then let's crop this over along here. We're making mouse droids. Yes. Okay, and then let's say maybe right about there. That looks good, something like this. Now, what you can also do is hit the adjust, and you can start even playing with contrasts in here if you wanted to, because maybe this will help out your image. You can play with some brightness if you want, maybe make less bright, play with the gamma, less gamma, right? So you can see you can start manipulating even the image here. So if you don't want to use that inverse, I can do stuff like this, right? And get a very different image capability here, right? Well, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Okay? And when I'm done, okay, I hit OK. And what happens now is you can see that image is sitting here. And now that's the only thing I'm looking at the front view is this image. Okay, so then obviously I want the side view here. So I'm going left, right now. So I'm clicking on that left, right option in here. Okay. And then clicking on map 1, and I'm going to click the exact same image. Right? I know I need to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate that. I'm going to adjust it. And you can see the adjustments remembering the last adjustments I made. So it's keeping a consistency for me. And now I just move this over here and move this where I want. I'm going to turn off the magnifier for myself here. All right, and we'll do this. I'll keep the magnifier on, actually. It's not bothering me. And then we want this cropped over here. And let's say maybe right about there is probably good. That's good enough. Click OK. And then there you go. And then so now what we have here, you can see there's a size discrepancy, right? Because that front view isn't as big a portion of the image as the side view. Okay? So this side view seems to be fine, looks pretty good, but you have the capability to scale up, right? If I want to, so I can start doing things like this, scaling up. And then now this is where, okay, the grid comes in handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the modifiers, okay? And then there's a frame of the grid here, okay? You've got this. This is RGB framing color. You have an RGB fill color, which this is filling, as you can see where there's not an image, that's getting very green, okay? So this, I want to mess with it. So there's frame opacity. So I'm going to crank up that frame opacity so I can really see the framing, right? And then there's an enhance factoring here still again too. This is the, so now you can see this, how this is working. You can see that block now. It's getting way more transparent. I'm really looking at now like line art, which is nice. So the reason why I was turning up the frame is I can use over here, right, as a guide to here. And you notice this drawing's kind of, the way I took it is a little bit crooked. So this is why we have these things like this angle. Maybe I'll need to straighten that out a little bit. So I'll put a little bit of an angle because the drawing, the original photo I took was no good, right? And then now I can play with vertical. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at that line right here along the floor grid, following it to here and getting relatively the same. And then down here at the bottom, I'm looking at this and seeing, all right, what we have here. So I can start playing with the scale a little bit more through here, right? And then I can continue to play vertically with this, maybe something more like that. But then I can also go to the front and back view here, right? And I can scale this up and down as well if I need to. So I have using this floor grid to set things up. Okay, and on top of that, when you guys go to roll over the model, you can see there's these lines shooting out. Okay? And what that's doing is helping me line up the images. So where this is sitting, right, is where I have the lines, and I can start also using this. So this is kind of why I like using this as reference images, because there are multiple things I can use as a reference. Now, this, of course, is just me taking a quick snapshot, and it's not perfect, right? So I don't want to, like I like to say, marry myself. You know, let's play with the inverse, because I actually, you know, for the first time, whoops, let me cancel that. Okay, I found a really great way to use the inverse, and darn it, I'm going to use it. And there we go. Okay, so now I want to start building this. And again, I don't want to marry myself to this image, so it's just to get a general idea of the slope and the back and the front. Okay, and so because I have a cube here now, right, I'm going to switch to ZModeler, right, and I'm going to hover over this top face. I'm going to start pulling. Okay, and let me change the opacity here so we can kind of see what's happening, right? So instead of doing this, where I'm adding, right, an edge loop here, right, so I can turn off Shift P, turns off the floor, so you can see the shortcut there, Shift P. Okay, I got this, right? I don't want that actually. What I want is this, right? I just want to kind of move the surface around a little bit, okay? So put our little image back on. We're making this mouse droid. So I'm going to click and then hold the Shift key and kind of just get that where I want it to be. Okay? So I'm just getting a general positioning here of where I want. Now, if I want to look straight on, I'm not going to be, it's going to be a tough time for me to get that face, right? So what you can also do is doing some masking very quickly, number one. So you guys could do this, okay, where I've masked these points off, okay, and these are unmasked. So if I switch to that gizmo, right, I can do this, right, okay. So again, I'm holding down Control and Alt at the same time, and what that does is whatever's inside the box is unmasked, and everything else is masked because I have no mask. So you don't even have to do that. I could also hold the Alt key, tap on this bottom point, right? And now that gizmo gets moved to the bottom, right? So there's no mask now. Here, I'm going to turn off, oops, I'm going to turn off the polyframe. I mean, sorry, the floor grid. And now you can actually use this to size this up. And this is one of the main reasons why I like to start with this type of a cube that's only 6 sides, because I free myself up to do this. So then if we turn on, again, our little framing here, I could just simply do stuff like this, right? And then now I can go this way and size it that way, right? And I'm not even moving anything. I'm not moving the gizmo, right? So because it's sitting here, and all I do is hold the Alt key, and it's going to tap on a vertex point, and then I'm storing that to the vertex point. There's no masking, no nothing, right? And then now I just say, oh, I want it to go this way a little bit more, and I want it to be a little bit taller that way. And then now if I go here, I can make it go taller this way, right? And then I go here. So you can see I'm just using the Alt key to kind of just move the gizmo to different vertex points, right? And then I can come here, right? And then now I could center this, right? And then just get this centered width kind of where I want it. Something like that, right? And I'm not trying to match yet the drawing 100%. I'm just trying to get a general kind of shape there, right? I'm just trying to make this happen. But this is a great way of using the gizmo to quickly move things. And again, this only really works well in this case when you have no other spans, right? Because if I was to put back some spans in here, right? So let's look at this same thing. So I'm just going to add multiple edge loops here. Right? So you can see I'm getting nice consistent width. Now, if I was to go back and do this again, right, you can see it's doing it, but it's also stretching the spans. So they're staying equidistant, the spans, but they're being stretched. There's times where I don't want that to happen, okay? So this is why, for me, working on this piece, it made logical sense for me to say, hey, you know what? A cube makes total sense to me to do this, right? Why not? Now I need to add an edge loop here. So again, I'm going to use my Z modeler, and I can say I want run right about there, right? So that's that edge loop. Okay. So it's going to allow me to change the shape. But the thing you got to keep in mind is I also want an edge loop right here, right? Because I'm trying to make this. If I was to just keep this edge loop, I'm going to run into a problem. For me, hard surface is like a chess game. So what I mean by that is we're going to be able to do this. I can center, and then I can enlarge right and start getting that shape. But you can see this is also getting that shape. So when I want to go put, say, something like this in, this is not supposed to have any angles. So you see how this has an angle and this has an angle? This doesn't. It's nice and straight, right? So this is why I would say maybe add another edge loop here and then do something like this instead. And then now I can do this, and you can see I'm keeping this straight to where I want it. Okay? Just thoughts like this. But what we also can do is I like to show more than one way to do things. All right? Is we can switch to our handy dandy multi-slice deformer. So I can just click on this, and now I've got a deformer. Okay? And what I want is I want to spread along the Y, and maybe how many spans do I want? So maybe I want this, right? And the benefit to this is I'm getting a poly group. So here again, we'll turn off our poly frame. So this is controlling, this green one is controlling my Y spans of the multi-slices. This white cone here that's on the end of the green one is showing controlling how many slices do you want. Okay? And the reason why I like this is this blue dot. I can actually click this and move this up and down if I wanted to. Right, so this makes a great way for me to move something like this and get multiple slices and change it on the fly and work with this. Okay? So it really starts to open up some ideas here for us. Okay? So far, so good for everybody. Okay, so let's turn on this again. So let's go, okay, I don't want, let's see, we want it maybe this wide, and I only want 2 slices, so let's go maybe here. Let's move it up like this and do this, right? Maybe we'll do something like that if I wanted to, okay? And then now I want to start putting an angle on this, okay? So we're going to switch back by hitting the W key, all right? And instead of me using the scaling portion of the gizmo, I'm going to once again use the moving capability, okay? So I'm going to unmask these 4 points here, okay? So if I can hit center, you'll see they'll go there. And I'm going to move this to right about that angle. So that's about where I want that. That looks good to me, okay? Then I come here and do this. And then now I want that angle to come way out like that. Okay, and I want to go this far. Not all the way out to here. I want to go all the way out here. I want to go right about there. Okay, and then now I can say, let's do this point. And again, I can center it. Start putting that angle in there that maybe I want. Okay, and then maybe this one, I'll go a little bit more further out here. So I'll match more. This is what I'm saying. This is why I'm saying you can't really marry yourself exactly to the drawing, right? Because you can see this angle is also a little bit different. And I'm going to be able to change that. So you got to pick one. You can't have both right now, right? Because see how this angle is pretty spot on and this one's not exactly spot on. So see this one's off now and this one's starting to get more spot on. So pick one. So it's because this one's spot on, I'm going to stick with just putting the top angles closer, right? And I'm just doing masking and unmasking and then doing straight gizmo. So I'm just doing a quick block out, and then now I can switch to this side, right? And look at this, okay? So I definitely want the same consistent angle through here, right? So I'm going to do an unmask. We're going to center that, and then I'm just going to scale this out, right, to give me that top angle again. Right, so now I got something like this. So you can see we're starting to now get that general mouse droid look, right? That I was going for from what we have here for our reference image. Okay? So let's continue working on this. So the next thing I'm going to probably want to do maybe is let's go ahead and let's Q mesh this portion out. So I'm going to over this yellow point here, okay? This has got a looping going around. I'm going to hold the space bar. I'm going to say Q mesh, and I'm going to say poly loop. You got to say it like that too, poly loop. Okay? And so now all this is going to do, you see that orange line? As I move it, here, I'll get closer here. Let's turn off the actual floor grid so you can really see it. So see as I move my cursor, you can see that orange line's now this way, and then now it's this way. That's saying the direction of my poly loop. So I just want to be coming off maybe out like that, right? I'll make a new poly groups by tapping the Alt key, and then there's that little ridge that I want to get in my mouse droid, right? So if I turn back on this, there's my ridge, right, that I have, okay? And then now I can start, if I want to, manipulating this. Because if you really look at the drawings, right, there is a little bit, see the gap here compared to the gap there. Okay, so now that I have new geometry, I can now, again, I'm holding down Control and Alt. I love this, okay? And then now that unmasks only these 2 points. Everything else is masked, right? I can switch to this gizmo by hitting the W key, bingo, bango. And then now I can say, okay, I want to get this angle more accurate, maybe more like this, and then move this angle more there, right? And then if I want to, you know, this is just me trying to be very accurate here to it and move it maybe more like this. And then let's do that and do that. So now from this view, I've got pretty much the drawing, right? And then this angle needs some adjustments as well, right? So then I would maybe, let's highlight these. Let's pull these out more. So maybe it comes out a little bit wider, okay? And then I need these points here to also pull out a little bit wider. So the bottom is bigger than the top in essence. That was what their original idea was here, right? And then there is my simple body that I have there, right? Pretty easy. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice indeed. Okay? So let's turn this off now, and let's look at what we got here, right? Simple, right? I started very simple. Now let's look, what is this thing going to look like when we divide? Because that becomes pretty important, right? So I'm going to hit the D key for dynamite! All right, just making sure you guys weren't awake yet. Now you are, okay? So now I'm going to say, always turn that on. So awesome. Now we've got some kind of, now it looks like a mouse or some kind of rounded surface thing right here, right? I'm reading a question about, is there a reason you would avoid working bottom to top extruding, scaling, and setting faces to achieve the silhouette? No. You could definitely work that way if you wanted to, for sure. Absolutely. This was just my preferred method that I liked to do what I was doing here, okay? So we don't need the draw palette anymore, so I'm gonna undock that. Okay, and what I'm gonna start to use now is the dynamic subdiv. So I've turned this on. So Shift D turns it off, D turns it on. Shift D turns it off, D turns it on. And that's because I have no regular subdivision levels. And now what I wanna do is start using my handy dandy creasing, okay? This is bread and butter for me. So there's a creasing menu in here, okay? And you have multiple ways to crease. So I can crease by polygroup. So I click this, only the polygroups, where there's different polygroups, receive creasing, okay? I can crease by an angle, and you can see now everything pretty much is getting a crease for the most part, except for these edges inside here, right? Because there's no angle change. So in essence, this tolerance slider right here, right? You can see that it's set to 30. So that's pretty much saying 30 degrees. So anything that is 30 degrees or higher, put a crease on it. Put a crease on it. Okay, so when I hit this crease button, it's looking at this slider. Okay, so as an example, if we uncrease all, right, and then we turn this up, let's turn it up to 90, just so you can see. See, nothing happens, right? If I turn it down, let's turn it down to 85, okay, increase. You can see certain angles get creased now and other angles do not get creased, Okay, so this is just controlling the tolerance of what gets creased and what doesn't get creased. And because I want also this to be creased, because I don't want that happening to the geometry, what's happening in there. So I've got a creased angle, right? And then it's meeting an angle that's not creased. So it's happening, that one vertex point that's sitting right here, okay? That's sitting right there. There's all three edges are creased, but then this edge is not creased. So that allows a little bit of movement to the vertex point. And I don't want any movement to that vertex point, okay? So I'm going to tell it, let's just do a crease all, and then hit D, and you can see now we're starting to get a little bit closer to what our mouse droid actually is in here, right? We're getting some rounding edging here. It's a little extreme, a little too much, but that's okay. This is still the very basic part of him, okay? And now for me, which is one of my go-tos and what I really like to play with inside ZBrush, okay? That did kind of remind me, I like that, of the Flying Jetsons car. I just saw that comment. It's so true. Like we were this, right? Totally like that. Can make the sound effect. Totally reminds me of the Jetsons. Nice call. So what I'm doing here is in dynamic subdiv, okay, I'm smoothing this 5 times. So in essence, I'm dividing 5 times. So if I go down and down and down, you can see there's pretty much no difference here, right? And the reason being is this slider is also looking at this slider. So you can see that there's a crease level. So this crease level is saying how many subdivision levels should you maintain creasing. So for those that don't know what creasing is telling the application, is telling ZBrush that whatever edge is creased, you're not allowed to move it when you go to divide up. Like it has to stay exactly where it's at. Okay? So what this slider says is, does that rule stay in effect for all subdivision levels? Okay? So right now I've got it in effect for 3. So you can see here I've got a smoothing of 2. So when I go to 3, right, nothing happens. Okay? Because this is set to 3. Right? So it's saying after 3 subdivision levels, go ahead and start smoothing the surface. Right? So I can move this to 4 and you can see that starts to smooth. And then obviously 5, it's smoothing more and then just rounding it more. And then 6, so forth and so on. All I'm doing is adding subdivisions. That's it now, right? So this is sitting at 5 and this is sitting at 3. So you can see what this looks like, right? This is really important. So this is what we have right now. Right, we'll do this. Okay, so this is dynamic subdiv along the top. I'm going to turn that off and I'm just going to divide. And I'm going to go 1 division. So there's 1. See, nothing changed. 2, 3, 4, right? And I want to start looking at this and start seeing what can start to happen with this, okay? So this is just, in essence, using divisions, okay? And then looking at your divisions, okay? And seeing, instead of having this to try and see what it's doing, okay? It might help if I turn on smooth and I divide 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then you can see you're getting the same thing, right? There's no difference here, right? So, but the difference is I've got 6 subdivision levels and I'm already sitting at 22,000 polygons, right? Where this, there's no subdivision levels and I'm sitting at 24 polygons, okay? So the dynamic allows me to see what I'm creating at a low level and also divided level. So now what I want to start doing is putting that little lip in there, okay? So we're going to use our handy dandy ZModeler brush. I'm going to insert multiple edges. I have interactive resolution, and I'm going to say give me that, right? So it gives me a span through there. Again, I would highly recommend when you're doing this, create new polygroups. So tapping the Alt key will keep creating a different set of polygroups. Okay? Because you never know when you're going to want to use polygrouping, right? So now I have this, right? So now this starts to give me this look. Okay? Then I'm going to say let's QMesh polyloop this in. right? And now I've got, well, how deep do I really want that to go, right? Or maybe I don't like how wide this is, right? So this is another example where I'm limited to the brush only going to give me so much spans. But what were we using before that won't limit us? That's right. I heard someone say it. Okay. So I can say here, right, and go back to this multiple slice, right? And now I've got this multiple slice, and I can move this down where I want, right? Start adding a slice, right? We'll do 2, and then now I can say really how wide do I really want that? Maybe more like this, right? And then I can position this where I want, right? And say right about there is where I like it. Okay? Hit the W key or to come back to the gizmo. W key goes back to this, W key to this. And then also notice this right here, okay? You've got a cone here to add creasing if you want to as well. We'll let that save. So what I'm going to do is go back into draw mode and then now push this in. And I'm going to change my polygroups on the fly. And I'm going to do a crease all. And now we start to get that shape. Right, so we're starting to get a little bit more of what I'm trying to do. Now, if I want to change the height of this, again, I like to use this. Right, I can use this, switch to the gizmo, let's center that, and I can start adjusting the height of this if I want to. I can move it wherever I want, even after the fact. Right, so now I have something more like that, which is closer to what we have in here. Right? And then now I want to start playing with, I like what's happening here, but I don't like how much smoothness is happening there. Right? I like this. This is good. This is a little bit too much smoothness, right? So see, there's too much, in essence, I'm looking at this rounded portion. Looking at this, it's not as round. Up here in the top, it's relatively round. It's still, that's probably still a little extreme. So this is all I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Modify Topology. I'm going to hit mirror weld along the X, and then there you go. So what that's doing is adding another edge loop down the middle, and that's going to change this. Now, you can see, going undo here, we'll zoom in a little bit closer. Okay, so here's with the edge loop, without it, with it, without it, with it, right? So you guys can see the movement that's happening. So what's happening is this edge has the capability to smooth out across the whole front until it meets this edge, and then vice versa. By me putting in a mirror and weld, it now can't go all the way across. It can only smooth to the furthest point it could go is here. So that's why this gets a little bit more tight. Okay? And then so if I start doing that same thing where we just insert an edge, and this is why dynamic subdiv is nice, I can click here and see I can adjust that top and go really harsh, or maybe do something like that. Right? And then I can say, do I want even a little bit more along the edging there? Right? Make this. And see, I'm just moving the edge back and forth. So what I'm doing is I'm adding an edge loop, and then I'm just watching those change. Okay? Now, what's something I want to highlight here, notice that this is perfectly straight. Right? So I'm going to delete these. When you're inserting this, okay, notice that this starts to take on this angle. These are taken on that angle. This edge is taken on that edge. This is taken, so forth and so on, right? So what I was doing, right, when I was clicking, I was keeping them perfectly parallel with the center point. Right, so you see the difference there? So what you're doing is, if you look at, here I'll turn off symmetry for now, this edge, right? There is a center point to the edge, okay? And that center point, okay, is important to us. So when I click closer to this one and then hold the shift key, you can see this stays parallel with that closer edge, which happens to be perfectly straight. If I let go, see the curve tries to take on whatever edge is getting close to. But if I'm holding the shift key, you're telling it to constrain it exactly to the closest edge I click to. So, right, so if I clicked here and held the shift key, you can see this is taking on the exact distance all through this angled edge. And maybe that's what you want. Okay? So again, I'm clicking here and shift key, okay, and going through it. right? No, you don't need to push creasing all, right? Because you don't need to crease everything, right? You only crease when it's necessary. So me right now, I found all these outer edges I wanted crease because then it's helping me create some of this roundness. And now all I'm doing is inserting an edge loop to kind of just adjust that top portion because I don't want it smoothing as much, right? And then maybe I'll add a point, an edge loop here to play, see with that back a little bit. Add an edge loop here so you see to play with that front just a little bit. And see now I'm getting, I think, a little bit closer to the original mouse droid, right? And all I'm doing is adding supporting edge loops just to give it an extra little push there, right? And so this is the base. Like, this is how easy he is, right? He's not very difficult at all, right? And of course, doing the wheels is super easy, right? So this is where maybe I can do a lot of things with this, right? So I can say, let's duplicate this, and let's turn on our handy dandy here, our gizmo. We'll center that. I'm going to click the gear, and I'm going to say, give me a cylinder instead. Right? So now I've got this cylinder, and so this is where the W key, okay, comes in handy. So I can say W, and I clearly want this to be rotated like this, right? And it's way large, so it needs to be a lot smaller. And then I need to bring it down, and we'll go a lot smaller like this, right? Looking at this geometry, is that what I want? So I can hit the Y key, and you can see I can change this geometry on the fly, right? Even after the fact I moved it around. And I can even add an inner geometry in here, right? So this is going to create through hole like a donut. So do I want that? Do I not want that? So I'm going to do, say, something like this, okay? And then because I don't like the result, what it's looking like smoothed, okay? I'm going to come to my polygrouping. I'm going to do a little groups by normals, okay? So this face has got its own polygroup, this face has got its own polygroup, and then the center portion has its own polygroup. I'm going to go to my creasing now and say crease by Paul Gaboury. BAM! Which is really crease for polygroups, right? And then now I have something that's a lot better, right? And so the beauty of this is I can use this to start building my wheels, right? But I also can start using this in another way, right? And I can use it to cut into the surface, right? So we can rename this wheel cut, right? And then I can turn on this live boolean up here. And then until right here, this icon, this is union. I'm going to say subtract. And then you can see now it starts subtracting, and I can change this size, position it to where's it supposed to be, right? And then maybe moving it up. And then there you go. I've got now the cutting through portion of that, right? So I don't have to worry about making the geometry to support that on the original piece. I can just use live boolean to give me this, right? And at any time I can change the size of this however I want, okay? So I'll turn on polyframe so you guys can see what's happening here, right? Change the size of this. I need it a lot longer, right? And then again, there you go. So maybe this is what I'm looking for. Maybe I'm looking for a cutout like that. Okay, so this is a great way to start doing this. Okay, and then of course, I can hold the control key, click on the arrow, and I can duplicate it. And then I got the exact same thing for the front. And then looking at the reference, it sits more like that, right? Because the wheels in the front are smaller and they don't stick out, right? The ones in here, the wheels are going to stick out, right? And so now we start having that, right? So it's that easy creating kind of that wheel well part. So, okay. You can call them Paul Gaboury's. It's fine. That crease PG, I use that all the time. And just because my name, why not? Now, sorry, I need to take a swig. I want to look at kind of these chips here and how I made those, okay? Because they were pretty simple. It wasn't crazy, wasn't anything nuts here, okay? So let's start out fresh. Okay, let's start with just a new piece. Okay, so here, let's say I think I have in one of the tools here, I have the actual chip by itself. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so here's the chip, right? This is what I'm using to populate this. So I'm going to show you how easy this was for me. It was quite simple. I'll turn on polyframe mode. So of course this is just a cube. Nothing crazy happening here, right? You can see that there's some creased edges here, right? You can know that by that dotted line you see on the one, and you can see in the other ones there's not dotted lines. That means the ones that don't have the dots are not creased, okay? So let's take a look at building this piece real quick, okay? Because it's pretty simple to do this, all right? So I'm just gonna, we'll clone this, all right? So we have it, and let's go ahead now. Let's do something a little different this time, just because I like to show you different ways. Let's go down to this initialize state and turn the X, the Y, and the Z to ones, and hit Q cube, and then you can see I get a cube, right? So that's the same thing in essence as going what's built inside the deformer menu, okay? You can absolutely get dynamic subdiv to react to new edges from live booleans. No, that's the point of live boolean. It's non-destructive, right? So even if we came back to this, that's a great question. So I want to spend a second to talk about that, right? If you look at this, these cylinders, see how smooth it is? It's dynamic subdiv. So even if I turn dynamic subdiv off, see? This is really what's being used, right? You see how faceted it is? So you can turn on dynamic subdiv and turn off dynamic subdiv and see the difference. And then the same thing, when you're adding edge loops or you're extruding or you're doing anything. So for example, here, let's turn on transparency and let's take this face, a single face, right? And if I start doing something like that, right? I don't know why I would. See, that's actually updating live, right? That's actually happening to the surface. Right, so if I came here and did this, so you can see it happening to the surface. This is the point of live booleans, is it's a non-destructive workflow. I'm not married to the result. Okay? And if you want to commit to your live boolean, all right, all it is coming here in the subtool, and there's a boolean here, and this make boolean mesh is where it gets created. Now, what's important here is I'm using dynamic subdiv on both of these pieces, right? So I would want to turn this on, right? So let's do something this simple and just see what the difference is. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on, create Boolean mesh, boom, it's done. So it's up here now. It creates a new creates a new tool, because again, we made a system that was non-destructive, so I could go back if I want to. So I click here, see, there's no difference, right, between this one and this. There's absolutely no difference. Okay, the difference is now we've committed the Boolean, and you can see all the geometry is now being committed. And you can see the only geometry that's changed is through here where the intersection's happening. So that's where the triangles. All the other geometry is how the piece would be. Okay? So what's important to understand here is if I turn off this dynamic subdiv and then do it, there's my result, I get this instead. Right? So you get very low polygon, and you can see the crazy triangles you're getting because we're not applying the dynamic subdiv first and then doing the Boolean actions. This is just doing the Boolean actions without applying the subdivs. So when I'm working with dynamic subdivs as I am here, I definitely want to have that button on if I'm going to apply the Booleans. Okay? So does that answer the question, Rogue, Bear, and Peter? Okay, hopefully that answers your live Boolean questions. Okay, so back to my chip here. Okay, I definitely want to work symmetrically, so we'll work along the X. Okay, so we're going to be in Z modeler, and I'm going to say I'm going to pull this out, but I'm just going to make it more of a rectangle shape, a little bit more like that. Okay, that looks good. Looking at this chip, right, if we go back to the original again, right, that I made. So we'll click on this. All right, let's do this. Let's just look at just this portion. All right. So we'll put a little screenshot in here so we can see what I'm doing. Okay, and we'll just do a little something like that so we can get an idea. We're recreating this in essence, right? And then I'm going to show you the really cool thing about this. Okay, and I can say, oh, it's a little too wide, so I'm going to click on this, hold the Shift key. I can change that width. Okay. I need to have spans here and have spans there, right? That's important to me. Okay. So I'm going to pull up and say I want like that. And I'm going to tap here and I get the exact same thing. So I got the same thing on either side. There's no differences here. Okay. So far, pretty simple. Nothing crazy happening here right now. Okay. Now I need to make these little spans going across. Okay. So I'm going to go to Insert on an edge and say multiple edge loops. And then I'm going to say how many I want. So in this case, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did 8, right? So I can actually come here and click on specific resolution if I want to, and then just tap, and I get 8, right? So I'm getting 8 now, right? If I don't do specific, I can just interactive and I count to 8. But since I know I want 8, why not come here, put the slider at the number I want, tap, and then there you go. Now I got the 8 that I want. Okay? So far, so good for everybody, yeah? Now, I want to inset here and here. So this is important for me. I can hold down the Alt key and draw out a temporary polygroup. So now I have something like this. Okay? Which this is creating just a temporary surface as like a temporary polygroup. Okay? And then now if I come to the face, the polygon face, I click Inset, right? I can inset this and get something like this to happen, right? And then again, I tap the Alt key, change the polygrouping. Now, if you notice, I've got a little bit more geometry in the top and the bottom, right? And I got a little bit more geometry here and there. I'm doing that on purpose, okay? There's a reason why I'm doing that, because when I go to Smooth, okay, and look at the dynamic. This is why it's so important to use dynamic. You can see kind of what you're getting. You're getting more of like rounded, like almost like it's doing this kind of a thing, right? That's not what I want. That's definitely not what I want, okay? So what I want to do is start thinking about this and saying, all right, I need to have some other edge looping here, okay? So I'm just going to say, let's switch back to QMesh. I'm going to say flat island. I'm going to pull this up a little bit and do that. And I'm also going to do it there. Okay. And I'm going to do it one more time there and one more time there. Okay. And then in here, okay, all I want to do is insert a single edge. Okay. So I'm going to turn on my symmetry mode along the Y. And then so when I click, I can get this here. Right? And then I'm going to switch to multiple inserts. And I'm going to put the specific at 1 and tap. And you can see I'm just creating kind of the same idea on the bottom and the top. Okay? And then now I'll do the temporary polygroup. Okay? And then now I'll do the inset and get this. Right? And then now what this is giving me when I go to Smooth, right? So you're getting a different result now. Okay? And again, if you look, I also did the same thing at the end over here, right? I added this, and so I could go QMesh, flat island, and say I want this to pull out a little bit. And then the same thing on this side. And then that way, these aren't destroying as much as what I have there, right? So temporary here, switch to my inset. Yeah, that looks good there. Okay. And then I'm saying, all right, this, let's QMesh, polygroup all that, push this in, change my polygrouping to what I want, right? So then I'm going to say, I want these faces here to be pushed in. We'll change that polygrouping, right? And you can see how quickly I started to make this piece. And now when I smooth it, this is what we're getting, right? So what I want to start doing now is taking advantage of some creasing again, okay? And this is why I kept changing my polygroup. So with one click, right, I can really establish different types of creasing here right off the bat, okay? I could also just click this and get creasing like that, right? So now I have something like this. And what I want to do is also come in here and I want to crease all of that, maybe, right? So I can do this. But you can see it's getting a little too squared for my taste, right? So this is why what do you want creased, what do you not want creased becomes important, right? Do you want more roundness or less roundness, okay, in here? So you can see I went with only creasing certain edges, and I added more spans of geometry, right? So I would uncrease all, and I would start picking and choosing. And I can even come here to a polygon face and say crease. Let's say polygroup all, okay? And I'm going to say this purple only outer edges and outer target, right? And then click on that. So I just had a bubble. Saving my project. And it happens. So load that up. That gives me a break to take it. Yeah, you could totally use the mouse when you're using ZModeler, or I just like having the pen because I like being able to touch on it. It's just my preferred method. It's just what I prefer to do. Okay, so now we've got this, and now I just start to pick and choose where I want my creasing. Again, ZModeler this, right? Switch to crease, outer targets and outer edges, right? And start playing with this. What do I want done? Okay, so I can click in go throughout here, right? So let's do polygroup all. Right, so what I want to start doing now is saying maybe this edge here, and I can do one edge at a time if I want, right? And then that'll crease, right? And then that'll crease. Or I can click here and say complete edge loop as well, right? And I can pick and choose these, and then that only that's now, and that's preferred. That's preferable, right? And then maybe I want those edges creased, right? And then I can turn off dynamic and say I want that creased, and that creased. Let's say those are the edges I want creased, right? Always turn this on, and now I start getting this, right? And then what I was doing was I was adding more edge loops instead. So this is where you pick and choose, right? So I definitely want this also the same thing on this side, right? I want those creased as well, okay? And then that way I have the same thing on either side. And then I made the decision, instead of creasing this, I went to inserting multiple edge loops, right? And I just did that, right? And then I could see it. And then now I just tap, tap, tappa, tappa. Go in your hole. Go where you belong. Right? And then it's giving more, I wanted that softer, kind of more rounder look to it. I wanted to have more of a dips in there. Right? And then I don't like how harsh this creasing is in here. Okay? So then what I'm going to do is go to here to, again, the creasing, right? And see this crease level with the dynamic. Okay? Maybe I want to start manipulating that a little bit. Maybe drop that down to 2, turn that off and on. So I'll get a little bit different look here, right? So again, this is controlling how much creasing is being maintained based upon this slider up here as well, right? So you can start playing with this as well to get different results. So in a sense, this is just simple getting the shape, right? So the top piece was pretty simple for me, right? All I did was go right along here, right? I just want to put a temporary polygroup, right? So in these faces here, okay, we don't want to add creasing to them. So let's uncrease that edge. I accidentally creased that edge. Okay, so in here, I'm going to Q mesh this. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is say I'm holding the Alt key and just going across. Right, so here I'll turn this off so you guys can really see what this is doing. Right, I'm just going across here to say there. Right, that's creating a temporary polygroup. Again, I'm holding the Alt key and then just moving across the surface. Okay, and then now I'm going to click on this, but I'm going to hold the Control key. And now I'm pulling this right off the surface. Okay? And then now I can say, let's Q mesh this flat island, pull that out, right? I'll change the poly grouping. Okay? And then I can say, let's turn symmetry on here, right? So let's have along the X. So I can pull this out to cover that up. And then these spans, right? You can delete which ones you don't want. Right? So I just delete whatever I don't want. Okay? And then now I'm going to start again, picking and choosing. I want that creased. I want that creased. Right? So then I turn to smooth. I get this, and I want these back ones creased. Oh, I don't want that. I want this back one back here creased. Right? So when I smooth this, I get that. Right? And what I decided to do was these here I actually didn't want creased. I kind of wanted to do a rounding more like that and like this, right? And again, you can see this roundness that's happening, right? But I can manipulate that and play with that, right? I can say, let's Q mesh this out, flat island, like that, right? And this will change some things. So let's crease, make sure those stay creased here, right? So this edge here, right here, this, I want that also creased on both sides. Right? And that's just adding again an edge loop, which is going to change this, right? But if I even, again, insert, say, another set of edges, let's do multiple edges. See, I can control kind of how round do I really want that to be, right? So I turn on dynamic and just start, say, that looks good like that for me. And then there you go. There's that piece that I want, right? And then I'm going to move it so it's sitting a little bit closer, say something like that. And then here's my piece. There's my little chip piece. Okay, so now what I've did, which came in very handy for me, is I turned this into a nanomesh, right? And there needed to be a specific number across, right, the actual piece, right, beyond this little guy right here, right? We needed to have a particular piece coming here, right? So this is the Boolean one. We'll go to this one that doesn't have the Boolean, okay? And I want to start maybe making something from this, okay? So what you can do, just like I just did, right? I could say, how about we just take these faces here, right? Because they're making up from this, okay? And let's just switch to single poly. Let's pull it right off, right? And that's keeping the same angle, right? And then I can say flat island and give it a thickness if I want to. Okay? So it's keeping this angle that I've already created and all the angles. That's not necessarily what I want to do now, though. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this edge loop and I'll delete this edge loop. Okay? I'm actually going to delete this one single polygon face here. Okay? And what I'm going to do now is let's separate this. Let's make this its own. Okay? So I'm going to say split it. Okay? And now it's its own mesh, right? So I can now say, how about I can do, like, say, a clip curve. And see, I can straighten it up. Right? So now it's creating completely perfectly straight. And then I can clip this way if I want to. Right? I can clip this way if I want to. So in essence, I'm building off the existing piece and maintaining the original angle here. Okay, so I got this plane that I'm going to want to put the chip on. All right, so we'll put this dynamic back on. We'll have these dynamics back on. We'll turn on our live Boolean so we can see what we're doing here. All right, and start now going, all right, so let's take this piece and say insert multiple edge loops and say, okay, I need so many spans across this way, and then I need so many spans across that way. Right, and you can see every single one here now is having a spot for me to put the chip. Right, so I can say, let's stick with 8 by 8, and then that's what I have. So I have an 8 by 8. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? 8 rows, and then I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Coming across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Because there's the outer spans now. So now I got a 9 by 9 happening, okay? And all I need to do now is that chip that we just spent time to build, which is right here. I need to tell ZBrush, okay, I want you to take this, all right, and let's turn this into a nano. Okay, so I'm going to hit brush, and the first thing I need to do is create it into an insert mesh brush. So I'm going to turn it into an insert mesh brush, say I want it to be a new, right? So now I got this chip that I can draw out to my heart contents, right? So no matter where I draw, I get this chip, okay? And what I want to do is switch it, right, to a nano. So right here, create nano. So now it's a nano mesh. And now the beauty is I come back to this mouse droid area here, right, that I'm making. I got this plane that already has the polygons. Then I see I'm hovering over face. It looks a lot like ZModeler. Hold the space bar and I say nano and I say all polygons. I draw it out. It gets to all of them, right? And then now in the nano mesh menu, here's all my chips. I can play with the rotation if I want to. So I can have 0 rotation, so I need a 90 degree, right? I can say it to fill it if I want to. I can fit it, right? And if I have my size set to 1, see it fits it and fills it, and then there's a fit. So see, a fit's stretching it. All it's doing is looking at the longer edge, right? And fitting it across this longer edge. The fill fills it across the whole thing. And what it does that is this, as long as the size slider is to 1, that'll work. The minute I do this, it's not going to work, which is fine. I want a little bit of gap in there, right? And then this is how I start creating the shape. Now the beauty of this, and the fact that it's a nano again, is this is something that I'm not married to, okay? It's not just happening, all right, here. And the beauty part is, okay, I can even edit the mesh, and now I've got the mesh, and let's just say I want to put my own little spin on this. So I'm going to go to ZModeler. Okay, let's do a Q mesh. Let's just do single, and let's do these two faces right here, right? Just these two green ones right here. I'm going to do a temporary. I'm going to push it in, right? And so when I smooth, it looks like that now, right? And when I come out of edit mesh, they all get it, right? Every single one of them is getting that capability now, right? So whatever you're doing here, right, editing wise, that's what you're going to get on the nano as well, right? So this allows me to quickly populate, and again, you can see how easy it was then to create that part of the mouse droid. It was quite simple. It was just a combination of using ZModeler with our nano, right? And then that led us into creating to where I have the final version. So we'll load this up again. And we'll turn off that chip. And you can see, right, this version here still has like all the chips, right, and the little everything else. And see, I added the little spacing that needed to be there based upon the original design, right? That was happening, okay? And then let's see, and then here's the final version where I decided what chips should stay, what chips will go, and I actually look at the referencing, right? And you see these holes in here? That was also super easy. I could actually, coming back to here, all right, I can use this same surface, okay? So I've got these chips, all right? So let's just, for the sake of just understanding, let's duplicate, okay? And I'm going to say brush, insert. We're going to grab this primitive. I'm going to grab this cylinder, okay? I'm going to say brush, create a nano mesh, right? I'm going to say all polygons, and I'm getting, see that, right? So I'm going to say give me the cylinder instead, and now I have this cylinder, right? And then so what I can do is say I want to tile this, okay? So I'm going to tile it twice along the H, and I want to go maybe, 5 across there. Right now, let's see what 4 looks like. Yeah, 4 looks better. Okay? And then I can play with this offset and the Z, so they're kind of intersecting like this, right? I can play with the size of them all together as like a unit, right? And seeing stuff like that, right? Then so my goal here, of course, is using these with live Boolean now, right? So I just use a cylinder, and I'm telling it to actually have the capability to have tiling capability. So I'm tiling it twice along there and 4 times along the vertical, and I'm just changing the size and giving what I want. Okay? So now I'm going to say inventory, all right? And I'm going to say 1 to mesh, and now it just converted these, right? So you see all these are converted. All right, so now if I do this, let's take these. These are going to be my little holes that the chips would be connecting into. Let's split this off. And now this thing, let's give this, because if you're going to use live Booleans, it's got to have thickness. Okay? So I'm just going to create some thickness to this. Let's say like that, right? And we put this above these little things, turn on that, and then there you go. Now it's like a pegboard, right? But I'm reusing that piece over and over and over and over again, right? And then, of course, when you throw these on, and then now if I turn these, right, go to nano mesh, okay, and say 1 to mesh if I want to. Now it's an actual pieces of geometry, right? I don't need the green piece in the back anymore, so I'll highlight those out, okay? Go geometry, and then now I just start saying delete hidden. And then now that's all I do. I start finding ones I don't want. So let's say this. All right, let's hide this. Let's just pick and choose and hide a couple. Right? And then all. Right? And then this is all I did. I just went and said which ones do I want to have. And then some are revealed. Right? That little pegging capability, and some are still in chip state, and some of them I removed. Just only like these pieces, right? So then you would have something like that. So there's just different kinds. So again, looking at the final, right? You have this capability right here. That's all I was doing to do all of this. Okay, so again, this is inspired by the contest that's currently happening on ZBrush Central, the Magic Wheelchair Contest, which is all Star Wars themed. We're teaming up with a nonprofit organization, Magic Wheelchair, where they make costumes for kids in wheelchairs, right? So this is an opportunity for you. There's only 2 weeks left, right? And there's some very cool pieces happening here. It's just amazing to be able to give these kids something that really excites them. They're loving it. It also can give capabilities to give kids an opportunity to express their personality. So here's some examples of past builds. So you got 2 weeks left, and what's going to happen is the builders, which we have Thingergy, and the Magic Wheelchair organization is going to pick the design that then Thingergy is going to build it, and we're going to unveil it at this year's Comic-Con. So you, the community, are going to have opportunity to design something that's getting unveiled at Comic-Con. And then there's also several other companies doing this. There's going to be 7 builds, and you are one of those builds. And then us as Pixelogic are also doing one. So if you're not already competing, I would say get in here. You got 2 weeks, right? We've made a project that you can download right here, this project, okay, that you can have. And it's giving you some images of the chair, so you can get the front and side view of the chair and build around that. Please take the time to go through this. Even if you're not going to participate, go check out what people are doing. Take the time to go and learn about what Magic Wheelchair does. It's an amazing organization. It was started by the 2 parents that have 2 kids in wheelchairs. The father just started building costumes for his son, and it's grown into this. And it's just amazing seeing the things that people have already built. You know, there's already Star Wars stuff. There's Moana. There's Harry Potter. It's all over the place. So we are doing a Star Wars themed Comic-Con version, right? So this is why I was kind of showing an inspirational the mouse droid capability. So unfortunately, I got to head out to a meeting, but I thank you for tuning in to this Did You Know That? Solomon Blair, I know, is going tomorrow. We've got a couple more. We got another stream today, though. So stick around. There are more streams happening today on the ZBrush Live. And then you also have Solomon from Pixelogic also going to be streaming tomorrow. So thanks for your time. Thanks, Mortar, for putting the link in there for everybody as well. As always, let us know if you need anything. All the best. And that's it for me, so I'm signing out. Have a great day, and we'll see you the next time I'm streaming. May the Force be with you. I'm out!